From my point of view, Lutosławski is one of the greatest composers of the 20th century. He was an innovator, but also a terrific musician, and went through very different stylistic periods. And within every one of them created something of lasting value.
In summer 2012, Esa-Pekka Salonen and I traveled to Poland to follow in the footsteps of Lutosławski, a man we both knew well and an artist who profoundly influenced both of us. So here we are in this little farming village of Drozdowo. We're not so far from Ukraine and Belarus and Lithuania. We're in the extreme northeastern corner of Poland. This is where young Witold grew up from birth to the age of about 11 when he went to school in Warsaw. It's the family estate. They were, the big landlords and the driving force in this part of Poland, actually. So it's amazing to be in this little church, just a few steps from the boyhood home, built by his grandfather for the village. And to imagine Witold being baptized here, practicing the organ up in this organ loft, serving as an altar boy to his uncle who was the priest. It's probably spending some of his childhood in this very room. Well, Catholicism must have been a huge part of their life, at least when he was a little boy, because it's the bedrock of Polish culture, really, And it's the thing that makes Poland part of Europe rather than part of Russia.
And it's a cultural identity as well as religious.
It still is, in fact, quite a strong cultural identity. When John Paul was II was Pope, it was a huge event in the history of this country.
And of course, during the Soviet days and the Iron Curtain and all that, of course, the Catholic Church was the kind of glue that kept the society and culture together.
Drozdowo, sandwiched between two empires, was inevitably caught in the middle of the wars that raged across Central Europe in the first half of the 20th century. World War I landed on the Lutosławskis' doorstep when the advancing German army arrived in 1915.
Because Warsaw was then occupied by Germany during the First World War, from 1915 onwards, the family and many other Polish families fled to what they felt at the time was the haven of Tsarist Russia. But of course it wasn't to be Tsarist Russia for very long. Unfortunately, Witold's father and his uncle were caught up in that, and they were arrested and executed without trial.
This place must have been quite intense for him in his memories, and I can understand that he didn't want to come back here much, if at all. It's also very interesting to see what an important family he was part of, and how despite the fact that they lived in this small place, they were still connected. There was a sort of political, intellectual connection with the world for generations. We never discussed his childhood or background or anything like that, and now this somehow brings him close again, but from a different point of view. When I saw the memory plaques on the wall of the church, local church, I realized that his early childhood and youth must have been emotionally very hard, as he lost his father at the age of 5 and his uncle, and then 20 years later he loses his brother and his cousin. His early life experiences must have been so dramatic and scary that most likely he kind of develops into this very private person who has to kind of protect his innermost core of who he is, emotionally very well, in order to not to be hurt.
In the music itself, there are these huge explosions as we get in the climax of Les Espaces du Sommeil for baritone and orchestra, the huge climax, and then this extraordinary expressive coda we get in Mi Partie, the massive climax we get in the second movement of the Second Symphony. These are some of the biggest utterances we've ever had in the musical repertory. And these came from a man who in daily life might appear to be very ordered and reserved. So there was a complete contradiction there between the man as we might see him and the man as he expressed himself artistically.